So here is a question. Because I just reported this story, right, which is obviously critical of Israel, even though it was actually reported and the persons who broke the story is an Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, right, does that make me an anti-Semite for reporting a story critical of Israelis' foreign policy? The reason I ask this is because according to many people, and even some laws, arguably, that have been passed in places like Texas and Florida, the answer to that question is yes. Yes. Criticizing Israelis' foreign policy can get you in a lot of trouble in the United States, but not in Israel. I take this up with Miko Peled. He's an Israeli with deep, deep IDF connections who authored The General's Son. For more on this, I want to talk to Miko Peled. He's an Israeli-American activist who wrote The General's Son, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine and Injustice. Something is going on in America right now that seems to be asking Americans to be beholding to Israeli foreign policy. Should we be somewhat bothered by that? And why isn't anybody questioning that?
That's a very good question. I think that Americans should be very bothered by this. Americans are paying Israel billions of dollars every single year in foreign aid, and Israel is a rich country that does not need foreign aid. So that's the first thing they should be asking. American foreign policy, particularly in the Middle East, has been written by the Israeli government, by Benjamin Netanyahu, not based on American interests, but based on Israeli interests. And I'm sure you remember when Netanyahu was here in front of at the Capitol, trying to explain why getting rid of Saddam Hussein and attacking Iraq was going to bring wonderful things to the region. You know, we know what that did. And now, for some reason, they're still listening to him.
Are we carrying Israel's water when it comes to foreign policy? I mean, you know, Bibi Netanyahu says jump, and our administrations all tend to say how high?
Yes, that is precisely the reason. And I think Netanyahu and generally the organizations in the United States that support the state of Israel, AIPAC and some of the others, have a lot of clout. They have a lot of say in Washington, D.C.
Good on them, though, right? I mean,
well,
I guess.
Of course. I mean, that's the way the system is. If you have a strong lobby, you get what you want, of course. The fact that it is not good for Americans, the fact that it's wasteful, the fact that it's ruining the Middle East, and the fact that it is making peace less and less possible than ever is something that Americans need to consider. Is this the legacy they want?
But guys like me, for example, we get very conflicted. I think a lot of Americans have this problem. Every single person that I have ever known or grown up with in my neighborhood who's Jewish is a great guy, tends to be. I mean, you know, every group has its bad apples, right? But every Jew I've ever known in my life is generous, is kind, tends to be kind of smart. Just generally really cool people who I like. When I went to Israel, I liked everything about everybody I met in Israel. I even like generally that I find it to be as much of a democracy as what we have here. But yet, when I am asked to look at its foreign policy, vis-a-vis our foreign policy, I find all kinds of problems with it. Yet, I'm conflicted by that.
Well, Jews and Israel are two separate things. Israel has nothing to do with Jews. Jews have nothing to do with Israel. The fact that Israel claims it is the state of the Jews, it is their own self-proclamation. It has nothing, no Jews have ever voted for that. So,
by the way, you say that, but a lot of people make others like myself feel like if I criticize Israel, I can't be a real friend of the Jews.
Those people are working for the state of Israel. That is not something that you will hear. If you go up to upstate New York, to Brooklyn, to places where the deeply Orthodox Jews live, you will not see a single Israeli flag. They will not tell you that at all. So we have to realize that some Jews who support the state of Israel, who identify themselves as Zionists, are identifying themselves with a racist ideology. And if you dare to confront that, if you dare to question that, the only comeback they have is that you are the racist, you are the anti-Semite, not that they are supporting a racist ideology, which is what Israel is based on.
How did you come to this awareness, given your background, and just how much backlash do you get from your friends about this?
Well, you know, I was a Zionist and pro-Israel as anybody, you know, with my background, of course. The only thing that makes us break away from deeply held beliefs is a tragedy, and it forces us to look deeper and reflect. In my case, My 13-year-old niece was killed in a suicide attack in Jerusalem, and that forced me to take a stronger, deeper look and reflect and see what is going on here. What would make 3 young men kill themselves and kill a bunch of other people? And then I began meeting Palestinians, because growing up as an Israeli, you don't meet Palestinians. You live in a very segregated, it's a completely segregated country.
Yeah.
So it is a democracy for Israelis, just like America is a democracy for white privileged people, but not so much for blacks and others. That is the same reality in Israel. And when I began to take that journey, as the title of my book suggests, into that other sphere, take that journey to meet Palestinians, I realized that there was injustice here. I realized that there was racism here.
Miko Peled, boy, I'll tell you, what a great story. Thanks so much for being with us.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm Rick Sanchez. You found us on YouTube, and that's awesome. But you know what? I'm also live every night at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern on DirecTV and Dish and cable and satellite, the RT app, and Pluto TV. I'll see you there.